Good afternoon. I'm Indrajit Gupta. I'm a co-founder at Founding Fuel. Welcome to our second Google Hangout. And the theme today is to really try and understand the AIB phenomena. They truly are a phenomena. They've in a very short time, built an incredibly highly engaged and a very large audience of young people who kind of love what they do. And they've very successfully used digital and social media to really build that audience and serve them well. So for us, this is fairly interesting because we're interested in creative businesses that have smartly used technology to try and kind of build audiences and serve them well. And today we'd try and see and understand and deconstruct the AIB phenomena. And with us, there is a very interesting panel. I'll quickly introduce them. From Delhi, we have Gursimran Khamba. Hi, Khamba, if I may call you that. Ajay Nair also joins us from Delhi. He's the director at OML, and OML has kind of advised and managed AIB's and charted their entrepreneurial journey. In Bombay, I have with me Pratiksha Rao, who is the head of entertainment at Twitter India. Hi, Pratiksha.
Hi.
And Aayush Soni, who's an independent journalist and is a contributor for Founding Fuel. Hi, Aayush.
Hi.
We're shortly going to be joined by Tanmay Bhat, who's also co-founder at AIB, in a few minutes. But we'll start the proceedings, and I'll just give you a sense of what the format is. And we've got three broad segments. We try and kind of understand the entrepreneurial journey, the early struggles, because sometimes we kind of fail to understand the path that these creative businesses take. So a little bit of understanding of how the team came together, what were some of the challenges that they faced in the early days of really starting up, and as well as how they cited the opportunity and what they did. Segment two, we'd look at what really worked and how they were able to raise their sights once things started to fall in place. And finally, we'll also look at what the future holds and see what's next. So we've also got we'll also take some viewer questions as well. So all those who are kind of watching, feel free to participate and join in. You can kind of tweet your questions to us with the hashtag LOL. So before we kind of, let's jump in with Khamba. I'll come to you first. Give us a sense of your early struggles, because sometimes we fail to really understand the entrepreneurial journey if you don't really start at the very beginning sometimes, and we forget the struggles that tend to precede the success. So just give us a few moments of and a quick sense of what it was before fame and success arrived.
I think, Indrajit, one of the struggles we have right now is how do we react when people call us entrepreneurs to begin with? Because I think at a very ethos about 5 years ago, I think, and this is for the entire team, we started out as stand-up comics, and I think, and we still do that. It's still technically our day job, even though content and content creation has become a really big part of what we do right now. But I think so when you look at the early struggle, I think the context of it is sort of broader than just the four of us and AIB. The broader context is that that stand-up comedy in India in English, especially, has started around 2009. In fact, I remember one of my earliest engagements with Aayush, who is in the studio, was I think when he was doing a story for Time Out, and I think back in the day I used to just blog and write some funny stuff, which I thought was funny. And he used to, and I remember he did like a small piece covering that. So I think the ethos of AIB, it essentially is based in that journey that all of us had as stand-up comedians starting from 2009, trying to get the word out there, trying to sell tickets, trying to encourage audience members who didn't know stand-up comedy in India existed in English. And very recently, from say for example, starting with AIB officially started as a podcast, and at that particular point of time, it started because we were rooted in that ethos of stand-up. Because stand-up comedy in the United States in English, in England, podcasts are a very integral part of every comedian in terms of the stuff they put out. Many successful comedians put out podcasts. So you're like, if they can do it in the States and sort of cultivate an audience, then why can't we do that ourselves? And the YouTube channel only started close to about 2 years ago. So for us, it's always, so the struggle has been, how do we take our comedy, which started off as live stand-up, and try and basically create and build a bigger audience. So for us, sort of that early sighting of an opportunity, so to speak, was when we started doing the podcast. And then later, YouTube was the next opportunity where we figured, okay, maybe this is another platform through which we can exercise a totally different creative muscle, but at the same time reach out to a much broader audience in terms of the kind of comedy that we like and the kind of stuff that we want to put out. So I think even though us as AIB we're technically only about 2.5 years old, the journey sort of for all of us as 4 individuals who make AIB what it is as of right now, started around 5 years ago when we started as comics.
Great. Ajay, I'll come to you because you've been, OML wasn't very big on comedy, really, till some years ago. What made you kind of think about developing comedy really as an area of focus for OML, which was used to doing live events and managing other artists?
I think for OML, the prism always has not been a form of entertainment, but the kind of audience that we talk to at all points in time. And we've always defined that as audiences which are interested in experiences beyond the mainstream. So while you like your Bollywood and you like your cricket and you like the things that you like your TV, there are people who have the time and the money to spend on things beyond that. Music was obviously the first peg for us in that, and we'd been managing bands and doing events for about 10, 12 years before that. Comedy actually was something that we knew that our audiences would consume. At that point in time, almost exclusively all the comedy they consumed was international stuff. So whether it's Russell Peters, whether it's any of the international sitcoms, was the only way for them to consume comedy. Like Khamba mentioned, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, suddenly English language comedy in India became a thing. There were people who were looking at it as a serious profession and as a serious form of entertainment. And for us, it was a very natural move that, hey, we talk to audiences who love alternative music. They also watch comedy, and now that is available in India. What coincidentally, I think 2 or 3 things happened back in 2013. One, we did a tour with Russell Peters in India. And one thing we saw, which was bizarre and is still true, is that it was the fastest selling tour ever in India for any artist. I mean, we've had big international bands come to India before, the Rolling Stones and Michael Jackson and everybody, but 20,000 tickets were sold in exactly 4 hours. And we were stunned by it. We never expected that to happen. And that gave us an inkling of how big comedy would be. In parallel, actually, we had just started speaking with AIB because we were big fans. More than anything else, we used to follow them on Twitter, and we were just big fans of the kind of content they would put out. They were just funny, right? So, and they were doing, I think, the 2nd season of the Bollywood spoof award show called Royal Turds that they were doing at that point in time. And Vijay, who's my partner, just chatted with, I think, Tanmay and Khamba and said, hey, we'd love to help with this if you think it makes sense. And we just started working together with that. And the third thing that happened at the same time was YouTube sort of exploding in India. Even if you look at YouTube internationally, while there's a lot of legacy content that sits on YouTube, which is films and television content, the real power of YouTube is when individual creators create content first on YouTube, and that works. And AIB obviously was the perfect collective in India to sort of start with that. So we'd been talking to YouTube, talking about figuring out how to get creators on YouTube, make content, and YouTube was very, very supportive. And together, I think we put together a structure saying, let's look at content as a fairly serious form of a slightly more disciplined way of putting out content instead of just, we'll do a sketch every 3 months. And I think within the first 3 or 4 sketches, we all realized that this is far bigger than, any of us had imagined. I think the first sketch that really went big was "It's Your Fault," which was about victim blaming culture in case of rape and sexual assault in India, and that just took off, right? And using comedy as a form of conveying as serious a messages, that was a very interesting thing for them and for us to see. So naturally, because OML has always been, I think, best known for artist management, managing comedians became a very natural extension of that. And AIB, I think, were the first set of guys that we worked with. And in fact, everybody else we have added in the comedy space pretty much has been a reference from somebody in our roster. So Khamba and Tanmay are the guys who will always tell, okay, these are the next set of guys who are really good and you should talk to them. And it just grew organically from there, where now I think we have a pretty solid roster. And now there are entire festivals that are designed around comedy. In some ways, it's strange, but comedy is far overtaken what we've done with music over the last few years, simply because I think as a medium, as a form of entertainment, you can reach out to far more people. It's still small compared to, say, Bollywood, but you can still reach out to far more people. You're talking about things which are very Indian most of the time, so people relate to it. And so, yeah, it just became an automatic addition to everything else that we were doing. And right now it's pretty much as important as music is for us.
Yeah. So that's useful context. Pratiksha, I'll come to you. Help us try and understand the phenomena that AIB is on the social media front, because in the way that they've kind of exploded and amassed and aggregated audiences for themselves and formed the community. Put that into perspective for us, given the fact that we'll talk a little more about how they engage in that audience, but in the scale of what they've built out, just help us understand that better.
Sure. So as I mentioned, a lot of their content is purely digital, whether it's outside of the live events, of course, so whether it's the podcast or their YouTube videos. So it is the digital audience that is consuming this, and what perfect place for them to come and talk about it than Twitter. So and because these guys are also on Twitter and they're amazing on Twitter, I think each of their tweets in itself is a content piece, just like their YouTube videos and their podcast. And because they've done a good job of engaging with their audience and just being active on the platform, the audience also on their YouTube channels and on their podcasts flock to Twitter to discuss whenever they put out new content. Just like when you watch a new movie or you watch a new episode of your favorite TV show, you go to the water cooler to discuss with your colleagues. Twitter is the digital water cooler, so to speak. So even a lot of the conversation that has developed in India on Twitter is now guided by a lot of content that's created on the digital platform, right? So while people do talk about cricket, politics, news, Bollywood, they're also talking about the new video that they put out just a few days ago. And these guys do a good job of also jumping into conversation about the traditional things that people might be talking about. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that. Ayush, you've kind of tracked this space for a while, both for Caravan, with Time Out, and now Founding Fuel as well, although albeit from a slightly different lens,
Sure.
if I may say so.
Sure.
If you were to kind of look at their journey and map that against any other comedy groups that have come up,
Right.
who would you kind of say is their biggest rival, if there is any actually?
Well, I guess the viral fever videos come to mind immediately, but the difference between an AIB or and the TVF, as the viral fever videos guys are called, is that AIB does well. There are two differences. The first is that AIB has actually developed intellectual properties and live events, whereas the viral fever videos are, as by definition, only digital only, as far as I know. The second sort of distinctive feature of AIB is that they do a lot of sketches, whereas a lot of the viral fever stuff that has gone viral and that has caught public imagination tends to be satire on news or public affairs. Not to say that that's not a good thing, but it's just these are the two sort of distinct differences between them.
Right. Thanks for that. Khamba, I'll come to you. often it's not quite understood that, kind of creating the sketches that Aayush was talking about is fairly serious business sometimes. I mean, there's a lot of research that goes in. I've heard a lot about your brainstorming sessions that you do, the four of you, fairly intense, high energy sessions. Tell us a little about what goes into really some of the brainstorming sessions, and how do you kind of come up with and sense the kind of things that will work?
Indrajit, we're having trouble hearing what you're saying. There seems to be a tech error on some level. Your voice is crumbling.
So I was asking about how do you kind of sense what will really work with today's audiences? And there's a lot of research, I'm told, that goes into the work that you do. And the four of you kind of usually brainstorm, and it's fairly intense, high energy kind of sessions. Walk us through that process. What really typically goes on? Is that better?
Sorry, I could only make out a few words. Really sorry, Indrajit.
We'll come back to you maybe after we're able to kind of fix that. Is that, Ajay, are you kind of able to pick up what we're, the conversation, or is the sound bad at your end as well? Yeah, okay. So I'll move to the second segment while we kind of fix the thing, and we'll kind of look at figuring out what's really worked for AIB, and how do you kind of from where they are raise your kind of, raise their sights. It's sometimes fairly difficult to figure out what will really work in a creative business, and in AIB's case, Aayush, it would have been I would imagine the Alia Bhat video that suddenly went viral on YouTube. Tell us what would have perhaps contributed to making that kind of work. What's your guess?
My guess is that they were, that they were very, very. The Alia Bhat video is actually a demonstration of the fact that how social media savvy the AIB crew is, something that Pratiksha pointed out a few minutes ago. Because the conversation, this also shows that, TV and social media, they have this sort of symbiotic relationship, and what tends to happen on TV is often much discussed threadbare on Twitter. So AIB actually picked that up very, very well, and decided to spoof it. So this is a demonstration. This is a demonstration of their social media sort of savviness. In fact, if you ask me, savviness is a term that doesn't quite encapsulate what AIB has done with social media.
Pratiksha, I know you spoke about the whole integration with television and YouTube videos and all of that, but there are many people who've tried to use that formula. Not everyone's had the same kind of success, particularly on Twitter and Facebook. So what's kind of, to your mind, unique about the way that they've kind of done it, particularly on the levels of engagement that one has seen with the community?
Sure. That's a question that's asked to us very often, like what works on Twitter, and what's a good time to tweet, how many tweets to send a day. I would just say that it's just like any other platform where you share media content. So a good movie is a good movie if it is actually a good movie. You can throw in additional things to bring more people to come to your movie theater, but it will do well only if people really like it and if the movie is great. So same is true for Twitter as well, right? So if what you're talking about on Twitter is good, it's funny, it's fun, it provokes a response, you will get the kind of engagement that people expect. Another thing that they've done really well, as I mentioned earlier, is that jump into conversations that people are anyway discussing, and like Aayush mentioned, that the Alia Bhat video was actually a reaction to something that happened on television. It was a spoof of that, and that was something that was discussed a lot on Twitter when it happened on TV, and then of course when the YouTube video was created as well. So just being agile with what people are talking about, how you can participate in that conversation, And also, unlike other traditional media platforms where it's a one-way communication medium, right? You put on television what you decide, and there is no way for audience to react to that, and you think you've put something great. But with Twitter or with anything on digital media, right, you can get that response instantly, and good or bad or ugly. And just engaging with the audience on Twitter is again a great way to let them know that you're listening to them, and that's something that everyone at AIB does a really good job of.
Thanks. Aayush, I'll come to you while we kind of get a link with Delhi Fixed. Often one of the things that isn't kind of seen or understood in some ways is the whole issue of execution, right? And crafting that experience so that a live event really stands out. Again, there are many live events today that audiences are kind of exposed to. And you've kind of studied this fairly closely, right? I imagine particularly all the work that went into designing the roast as an experience. Tell us a little about what you picked up which was distinctive and which might hold lessons for other creative entrepreneurs.
So the roast, designing the roast as an experience was completely the brainchild of Vijay Nair, who is Ajay's brother and the founder of OML. The idea was that this is going to be one of the marquee events of the year for OML, and something that people should remember 6 months, 7 months, even 2 years down the line. So some of the things, just by way of example, that I'd illustrate was the roast was held at the NSCI. So just before the NSCI, there were posters saying 1 kilometer to being offended, 500 meters to being offended. Then just as you entered the NSCI venue, there was a sign that said, "If you get offended easily, please take a U-turn from a few meters ahead, because this is really explicit content." All of these things, even when people entered the NSCI to sit down, there was a sort of a kit with a poster and with some in popular slang that's known as merchandise designed around the roast. Posters, probably a cap or something. So I think it just shows that even OML as a company, how imaginatively they have crafted an experience. It requires very, very deep knowledge of your audience and of the age group that is going to come to that event, and then crafting the experience around it, as opposed to just assuming that people will like X, Y, and Z, and we should just give that to them.
Ajay, you're back. We were kind of discussing the roast and all that went into planning it and executing it, and the attention to detail. I was hoping to kind of pick up something that Khamba had said right at the beginning, that he's still trying to figure out whether they fit the role and the profile of a creative entrepreneur. They still see themselves as a stand-up artist. Ajay, you've obviously had a lot of role to play in the way that they've helped them shape their ambitions going forward. What has your advice been in the way that they've kind of started to relook at their business, and how have you kind of worked with them on that? Just walk us through that.
I think just a couple of things, right? Just a couple of things. I think one of the things that I want to just clarify is even from the roast point of view, while OML had a role to play in terms of getting the production in place and getting everything else in place, AIB was the creative brains behind the show. And obviously, again, just to be very clear, the roast is not a very original format in that sense. It's been done for 50 years in the US, and I think AIB just figured out how to do it correctly in India and with as much scale as possible. I think our role there was making sure that whatever creative vision they had was brought to the audience in a way which was interesting and innovative, and think big, not do a 800-seater, but look at a big venue, etc., and make sure there is an attention to detail. Going back to your question on our advice and our role with respect to AIB, we pretty much let them do whatever the hell they want, and that's, I think, the best way it works. our job is to ensure that anytime they have an idea, whether it's a roast, whether it's a video, whether it's a TV show or a YouTube show, whether it's a stand-up show, we facilitate that, we enable that. We hopefully allow them to do it where it's commercially viable as well, because that's important. As a company, we've been helping them with setting it up, for example, but at all points in time, it's very collaborative. I think both Khamba and Tanmay, as well as Rohan and Shakya, have a very clear idea of where they want to be in, say, 3 years or 5 years. And it's not just to be a one-trick pony. It's not that, hey, we want to be the best stand-up comics in the country, or we want to be creators in the country, or we want to do these things. It's always one step ahead. For example, they now have a team which they're hiring, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So our job is, okay, these are the things we want to do. We'll help you in terms of structurally what needs to be done to ensure these things happen, because that, I think, it helps that we have some experience in doing that, and we struggled a lot ourselves, getting to a scale where we are. So a lot of those learnings are just passed on, saying, hey, this is how you set up a team, this is how you set up an office, this is how you think about as a company, this is how you manage your time more than anything else, because the most valuable commodity that AIB has is time. There are 4 of them. There's a lot of effort and time put into every single thing that's done. So this is how you prioritize things. And second thing is just to remove all kinds of risk and insecurity from the setup, right? So if you want to, for example, tomorrow do a 50-city tour in the US, we'll figure out how to get that done. As long as that's the ambition they have. I think we just make sure that don't worry about any of the logistics or the back end. You figure out what is the best thing you want to do at this point in time. How do you want to spend your next 6 months or a year? And we'll figure out how to get that done. So it's always been collaborative. Creatively, they lead everything. And increasingly, one thing that we've seen is, I think, especially over the last 6 months, is as entrepreneurs, beyond just being creative people, they have a very clear sense of where the business needs to be. And that's fascinating to see, because there are very, very few artists that we've dealt with, both in India as well as internationally, who get a sense of how to do business as well, right? So how to think of the brand, how to think of marketing, how to think of a company structure, how to make it sustainable. And they are very, very open to different models, hiring writers, for example, and not saying, oh, the 4 of us will do everything on our own. And one last thing I'd say is, between the 4 of them, they have now figured out a model where they divide and conquer a lot of things. So it's not that all 4 have to be in a room to decide every single thing. So we just help shape a lot of those things. But beyond that, it's their company. And I think irrespective of whether OML is there or somebody else is there, they have the sort of juice and the vision to be able to, go big in the next couple of years.
Terrific. I'll pick up the threads on a lot of what you said. But I'll come to Khamba. Khamba, the question that I was kind of asking you when we got cut off was really around the whole creative process, and how do you kind of sense what will work with today's audience, and also in terms of how the creative product gets shaped. Can you give us a sneak peek into how that creative process works for the 4 of you, and how do you kind of leverage perhaps the diversity that exists in the team?
I think it's a very simple thing for us, which is that even as comedians, right? As comedians, you talk about the thing which you find funny. And essentially you go on stage and you hope that other people find that funny as well. I think similarly with the kind of content that we do as well, the one sort of, I would say the core guiding thing for us is, are we going to have fun doing this? And do we find this funny? And that's essentially the sort of primary thing that sort of governs essentially any kind of content that we create, or whether we want to write any script for a particular show, or whether we have a stand-up show to do, or whether we're producing just a sketch. Similarly with, say, for example, even if you look at a video that we're doing, which is, say, for example, something like Save the Internet, which we worked with the Media Nama team and the Save the Internet team around net neutrality. The idea was that it's an issue that everybody in the team really believes in, given the fact that it essentially affects not just us, but other young people in the country as well. And on not just from a principle level, but also on some level as a business, in terms of how you do that, how that affects you going forward. So I think even within the team, the creative process is essentially us looking at, okay, what are the things that we really want to do? Is there a subject that fascinates us? Is there an insight which we find that we need to do something about? And obviously there's a lot of back and forth that happens in terms of how to go about doing it. But I don't think we've had too many disagreements on, yes, this is something that we need to do, or this is something that, say, for example, needs to be spoken about. So I think the creative disagreements that happen more through more in the sense of which form do we express this in, rather than the subject at hand. And so that process on some level has almost remained really static. We just go with what makes us laugh and what we want to talk about.
Right. I'll kind of quickly move on to another segment altogether, which is what lies next, and I think Ajay talked about that, and he also talked about how the four of the folks at AIB have also figured out a clear vision of where they want to go. And I wanted to kind of come back to you, Khamba, if you could kind of walk us through how you're kind of looking at the future, because you've clearly come a long way. Now, what lies ahead? What's the future like? And I'm hoping Tanmay will join us soon and add to that as well.
So again, for us, it's the core thing is that we don't want to be limited to a particular platform. The same sort of insight that we apply on a live stand-up show is the same insight that we apply on the kind of content that we do on YouTube as well. But the idea is also to move into different platforms. So, for example, the movie business is something that we're specifically looking at, because we feel that there is a giant gap in the market, in the sense of the audience that we speak to, the kind of audience that we have that watches us on YouTube, the kind of movies that are being made perhaps do not speak to them as well. And now in general, it's a very exciting time in the industry, given that different types of content finds backing, and more than finding a backing, finds an audience. At the same time, we also work a lot with brands in terms of creating the kind of content that we feel works. And this is not just limited to digital, but also, for example, more traditionally mainstream platforms, like whether it's commercials or whatever. So for us, that we are very sure in terms of not, for example, compromising on what forms the core of all of us as people, which is doing stuff live and doing stand-up and creating sort of theme shows like we have been doing over the last few years. But at the same time, the different aspects of the business in terms of content, we want to make sure that it's not specific to one particular screen. And I mean, to be very honest, nowadays there's no differentiation in terms of watching TV or watching cinema on some level. It's essentially one giant screen. But the idea is to just try and reach different types of audiences through the different platforms that exist within the country, while keeping in mind that we have a certain sensibility, and how can we push that sort of sensibility out there, and hope and see that leads to, for example, more people getting into the business as well and expanding the entire pie.
Right. So we've
that was amazing.
got
So
so we've got Tanmay now with us. Tanmay, welcome to the show.
Hi.
We were essentially talking about what lies next.
Yeah, wow, that was
Yeah. So
I didn't know half those things.
tell us. So tell us what your sense is of where you want to go.
I don't know, but like for me, the absolutely.
Ajay says that you're absolutely clear. So let me just add that before you came in.
That's Ajay overestimates us at all points. I am most concerned about what our next video is going to be, honestly. Like, we literally go by, I mean, except for all the things he said, I think just from as artists also, like, we are exploring, this is all new opportunity for us. We never thought we'd be in a place like this. So we are literally going like, what's the next fun thing we can do? What's the next fun thing we can do? You know, that's literally, I'm talking purely from the gut. That's how we take it.
Sure.
You know, everything we've done so far has literally been that, like, hey, what's the next fun thing we can do? I think as a brand, like, all the exciting things, like movies is exciting for us. But if you do movies, you got to do it smartly, unlike how it's been done, like whatever our attitude towards everything is.
Sure.
So yeah, so all sorts of things. There's immediately priority, what's the next video, and need to get back to doing podcasts regularly. Like, those are two immediate.
Why is that? That's quite intriguing that you
because
mentioned.
we haven't done a lot of podcasts, and we started off there, and we really enjoy it. We really enjoy doing it. So this is like, if fans are watching this, these are the correct words they want to hear, you know. So yeah, I'm excited about that kind of stuff.
But hasn't video really, I mean, changed the whole
videos great. Videos great because we got into video because it was exciting for us. Oh, it's a new thing we can do, and we got addicted because just it's video, you just reach so many more people. But I think we began with the podcast, and I think it's really important to us. We've recorded a few recently, and we're going to get back to it regularly. I think that's a medium that's so unexplored in India. Video as well. Right now, there are a lot of new creators who've come in, but podcasting as a platform hasn't really been explored entirely. There are a few players here and there. Yeah. It's getting better, but I think there's a massive growth possibility
that's
there.
Music to our ears, because we do believe in podcasts a lot ourselves, and we're quite excited about that space as well. And you're right. I mean, there's very little attempt to try and create a market. I mean, if you don't put out good content, then market will never take off, right? So that's
so fewer people listen to podcasts, so fewer chances of us getting into trouble, which is a great incentive nowadays. So,
right. Ajay, I wanted to come to you because live events are reckoned to be a big driver of growth, but what is it that we kind of have to think differently in terms of making live events really a much more stronger engine of growth if you look at the entertainment space? Any thoughts on that? What the future will look like for IP based live events? We've kind of lost Ajay. I'll come to you and maybe Tanmay as well.
Ajay is like, I'm out.
No, so from a creative standpoint, how do you see live events kind of taking shape over time? I mean, roast was of course much talked about, but
I don't know. A lot of what we're doing, there's no precedent that's been set.
Right.
I mean, I've always said that the live event space, there's a lot of fixing to be done, because it's something like the internet. You just come in and you do your thing because everything eventually falls into place. But with live events, I'm talking purely about in terms of events. I'm not yet talking about the IP aspect of it. Just the system needs to be fixed such that just you need to foster the growth of these things. You can't just do it. Right now we're working because comedians are desperate and we want a new stage, so you're going to bar to bar to bar. But you don't have dedicated performance venues. It's a shame we have one comedy club in an entire country, So yeah, we got to fix it from an infrastructure level first, and I think then it'll begin. But I think we're nowhere close to. People don't look at as creating IPs when it comes to live performances. I mean, where is our Broadway? Where is our West End? Where's that kind of stuff? At AIB we just have dreams of, we want to do this funny musical like this. You look at Book of Mormon in New York and you go like, we want to create something like that. But where's the economics of it has to work out first. There it works at a West End or a Broadway, it works because they said them invest millions of dollars in this one particular thing and it lasts for years because they take that seriously. We don't have that yet, which is really sad, because they just look at India's history of literature. There's so much you can adapt to making it live. It can be amazing. And there are so many art forms in India that already exist which are not getting the platform. So I think if the infrastructure fixes itself and it becomes a viable career option, then automatically everything else will follow.
Right. Ajay, you're back. We were talking about live events and what's the next generation of live events that we're likely to see in India, provided, of course, some of the infrastructure issues are addressed.
Yeah, like parking. Right, Ajay? We need to fix our parking first.
Right. So basically, I think one thing we've learned by being in the business for a while is if we wait for the infrastructure to get fixed, we'll keep waiting for the next 50 years. So you just have to work around what is possible, right? So I think the endeavor always is that if there is a certain form of entertainment or a show, etc., that works, we figure out how to make sure that it happens in India. Because I don't think relying on infrastructure getting fixed is a good way of being an entrepreneur in this business, because you'll just be always worried and frustrated. I mean, we had a massive event cancelled earlier this year in March when Seinfeld didn't happen because of parking issues. So I think we don't want to, that's something which I think a generation ago, people would have just said, let's shut the business and, go back to doing investment banking and engineering. I don't think that's what we want to do. And that's what I think a lot of creative entrepreneurs in this space today are far more focused and committed and figuring solutions despite these things, right? So for example, when Tanmay mentions that, internationally, the reason shows are productive and are commercially viable is because in Broadway, you can do a 50-run play over 50 days, and therefore any investment you make is recovered. In India, maybe that's not possible, so you figure another way of monetizing it. And I think for a simple thing, right? So if today you want to do a show in India, say you want to do a late night show in India, right? There are two approaches to take. One, to say in India there are not enough budget, so let's just cobble together something in 2 days, and every 2 days we'll put out some piece of content which is pretty much crap. And that's the best thing we can do. Or you go back to basics and say, hey, we need a team of 50 people to put together a show. What does it take to get that done? Does that mean we need financial backing of a certain sense? Do we need infrastructure of a certain sense? And we just put it together. Do you need to talk to 10 people internationally to figure out how to get that show made in India? So you do that. One good thing is now there is access. We are able to talk to people in power, for example, who sometimes are willing to help. And we are able to talk to experts across fields. Primarily also because I think everybody, and it's not just film stars or just audiences, even people in power today have seen the power of somebody like an AIB when they talk about an issue. When you look at something like Save the Internet, people see that an AIB can today influence policy, and in return they therefore know that this is a fairly valid point of view and a voice, and it's useful to sort of work along with them. And we've seen that a lot, especially in the last 6 months. Despite the roast and stuff
Stop
like
it.
that. So I think Tanmay, stop laughing, man. But it's true. So I think you just make it happen, and the more we push the boundaries with that, whether it's a roast, whether it's a TV show, whether it's something on YouTube, whether it's a live tour or something, automatically other people will follow, and it just starts happening. When we did music festivals 5 years ago, nobody said that that's going to work in India. Suddenly you're pricing tickets at $3,000 and why the hell will I come for that? But you just stick to it and you just keep doing it. So it's easy to complain about infrastructure and those things, but it's more fun and creative to figure out ways around it. Right. And we are a very privileged generation. We are very fortunate. We have access, we have talent. So you just capitalize on those things and these things will happen. I mean, there are countries around the world where things are far, far, far worse. So I think as Indians, we are good at jugaad, so we just use that.
I'll build on what you just said, which is that I think the sense is that we're just still scratching the surface, right? There's a lot of headroom for growth, especially if you go beyond the metros and start looking at. But how will your kind of creative product really need to change or upgrade as you kind of start looking at pushing deeper into India and the other new towns and cities? Any thoughts on that? Are you already getting there? And I'd love to hear from you as well.
2 weeks ago, I was grocery shopping with mom when my vegetable guy took a picture with me.
Okay.
So I think that bridge is already being gapped. I think I always used to have this conversation. There's India and there's Bharat, right? And that line is blurring every day. So I think a lot of times we feel like, oh, your sensibility or the sensibility might not work with the rest of India. I'm like, you don't know the rest of India. They will surprise you at every moment. Every time we do something, you realize we are discovering newer audiences.
Have you kind of got that sense already from the work that you've done?
Yeah. I mean,
other than the vegetable vendor.
Yeah, no, always. Like, we are surprised whenever we go everywhere. We are surprised at the kind of people who we meet and who we talk to. I've met people from like me and Khamba have done shows in. I remember we were doing a show in Pune, or no, it was Kochi, right? I remember we were doing a show in Kochi, and this really elderly lady. She came up after the show with her son, and she said, "We listened to your podcast together," which was fascinating. Never thought. She was like, yeah, son goes to school or whatever, and college or whatever, and then I have 3 hours free in the afternoon. I just put it up on the system and I listen to it when I'm cooking food or whatever it is, which is fascinating. I never thought that would happen. Yeah. I mean, I can't even recall the number of examples where we've discovered just people in different corners. We get mails every night after 9 p.m. Our inbox just starts filling up with people who are at home watching us on a screen. Right. Just writing long emails about what they feel about us, etc., etc., etc. And these emails come from everywhere. Right. I get long emails from Indian in France saying, I watch you guys, I've made my French colleagues watch your stuff. They in turn showed me some French creators. Here, you guys should also check them out. And I'm telling you something from last night. This is an example. This kind of stuff we get every day.
Right.
So we are ourselves surprised. I think, and I think in general, you would be surprised at how quick that line is blurring.
Right.
I don't even know if it. Yeah.
Pratiksha, do you see any signs of that? I mean, is social media really going to be able to break through now? Because it's often said that social media is really at the top, whatever, 10% perhaps of the market, and we've in some ways fairly elitist in adoption of social media. Any thoughts in terms of where you see the growth coming over the next 5 years?
Sure. I mean, I would completely agree with what Tanmay just said, and all their content sits on digital media. It sits on the internet, right? And it's become a frictionless platform that people can access. Of course, bandwidth issues and things like that are a problem in India, but it's getting better and better every day. And yes, you will be surprised with how the content choices of somebody in Delhi are very similar to that of someone in Bhopal. And YouTube, Twitter, all these other different digital and social media platforms have really helped break that down. And now, if the aunt from Kochi wants to talk to Tanmay, she can tweet to him, and maybe he will reply.
Snapchat.
Yeah.
Snapchatting with fans. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's really changed. And also, I mean, at least for Twitter, I can say that now that we're having the platform be accessible in multiple languages. So there is also the language, issue is also being taken care of. Now you can, access it in Telugu, Kannada, Hindi. With
that's really going to kind of
exactly.
I feel like this conversation, like this question of this in going into India, I feel like we should be done with it. It's an old question. It's not relevant anymore. I mean, the
language.
Yeah, but language also happened some time ago. I feel like that question needs to be laid to rest. There's no doubt about this.
And there is no reason why you need to look beyond India, I presume.
Not yet. We have no ambition. I mean, we are now looking at Indians, which is a pretty big market in itself.
Sure, absolutely.
And with any luck, we'll be able to bridge that gap as well. I think, the internet. It's
sure. But Pratiksha, you do work with other, entertainment partners, and there are now a whole range of tools that are also available that help you in some ways engage better with audiences, understand them better. Any couple of examples of the kind of tools that Twitter has on offer that would in some ways help folks like these to understand audiences better? I
think one of the things that we offer is Twitter itself, which is a free marketing platform. And any tweet you send goes to each and all of your followers. So the platform in itself is so powerful, and it's a public conversational platform. So what you say on Twitter can tomorrow be in the news, which can be sometimes a good thing. Sometimes you have to be careful about what you're saying. But the platform in itself is so powerful. But apart from that, we are giving our partners more and more access to analytics, data, things like that, for them to understand their audience. And for example, we started offering missed call SMS Twitter service, which was something that was piloted exclusively in India, keeping in mind the audience here and what feedback we were getting, and bandwidth issues, things like that. Even now with languages, so the number of languages that we've enabled in India is probably maximum than any other country. So we are actually innovating more and more as our partners keep sharing feedback. These guys share feedback about this works, this doesn't work, and now you can even upload videos, audio, images, things like that. We're working on making the app much more accessible on Indian network as well. So yeah, we're learning from our partners, but I think especially in terms of understanding the audience, there are a lot more tools available to them now.
Right.